Hello, welcome back to another FPL video on Fantasy Football Scout. Because of the week it is Game Week 18, we're of course talking free hit once again. We've got another draft lined up, this time with Sam from FPL Family. How are you feeling about it all?
Oh, I don't know, Andy. I think I'm a little bit kind of free hit. My brain's gone a bit numb in all of it. I think there's only so many times you can kind of look at your team without thinking, what am I doing? I just need to get free City, free United, free Arsenal, be done with it.
Yeah, I think in a week like this, where, if you use it in a double game week, it's a bit different because every team's playing. But in a blank game week, you're already boxed into, 12 teams, I think. And then you can already probably discount 4 of them because, who wants Sheffield United players, for example? And then it's just so easy to overthink. And they got extra time this week to think about it as well because there's still, the deadline's not till Tuesday. So it can feel like that, but we will get into it anyway and see how you're thinking currently right now. I've seen a few drafts with a couple of Spurs players, one Spurs player, no Spurs player. I knew when you sent me the draft it would have 2 Spurs players in it. That was like no doubt in my mind. So Son and Kane are the obvious ones. I think outside of a defender, no one else is really looking at other attackers. Let's just start with the Spurs boys. How do you think that game's going to go? Because Villa are no pushovers like they were at the start of last season.
No, they're definitely not. And they've actually been really solid defensively this season, which does put me off a little bit owning both of the Spurs boys. But I'm finding it difficult to decide which of them I would keep because I definitely want to have one of them in there because whilst I think Aston Villa is a tricky game, I do think the way Spurs set up, they will score goals. And therefore, I think having one of them is a sensible idea. I do wonder whether both of them is a little bit overkill. And I think if you were to kind of put me on the spot right now, I can't see me losing Harry Kane at any point the way that he is right now. So it'll probably be Son that goes if I end up losing one of them. But whilst Aston Villa have been good defensively, they have had wobbles, and it only takes a minute with those two together on a football field to get them to score a goal. So I think they're still worth holding for this week for sure.
If you were getting rid of Son, who have you got any replacements in mind? Because obviously you've already got Rashford in and De Bruyne and Fernandes, and unless you got a lot of money, do you have any money in the bank with this draft? I'd say not a lot.
Not a lot. No, not a lot. So it does make that difficult transition point. There is a lot of money elsewhere in the team which I could take out because this gives me quite a nice bench, including the spare at Newcastle in goal, which really I could save myself 0.8 there. And so there is bits and pieces in this team that could move around, which would free up more money. It doesn't quite free up enough to get to the likes of Sterling, who is probably, the Man City player of choice that I don't yet own. But equally, I think I might prefer the double up at the back with Man City. I think having Cancelo and Diaz might be a nicer option than KDB and Sterling. So that's where my kind of quandary is right now. It's if I do take Son out, who am I taking him out for? Like, who is really a better option than I've already got?
I think that's the difficult thing with holding Kane and not Son because Kane just is more money. That's the problem with him, I guess. Like, I've put a few drafts together, and I think the only way I made Sterling work was no Kane and no Rashford if I wanted Son. But basically, you have to decide between Son and Rashford, and then the other one becomes Sterling, and obviously you drop Kane down. But to be honest, in terms of strikers, you've got Kane and Wilson. Obviously, Brewster's just a bench option.
Benched.
Is there any other strikers you've even got your eye on? There's like Watkins, Calvert-Lewin, Fabio Silva. The list is not extensive when it comes to forwards this week.
No, and I think for me, I've owned Watkins for a number of weeks this season and just never quite lives up to the hype. And against the Spurs team that are more solid defensively, they don't let in a lot of goals. He seems to need a lot of opportunities to score one goal. So I'm not sure that this will be his week. Calvert-Lewin's a tough one because I think that game is so difficult to call in terms of which way that will go. It's one of those games that you feel like you should invest in, but I'm not really sure what side of the fence I'm on with it. I do own him at the moment still for my sins. I feel like I've held him for a bit too long now. But they're just not making as many chances as they used to. And as a result of that, he's getting less opportunities, which in a week where, I'm going to play a chip in order to boost my rank against those that aren't playing chips, I don't feel like taking a chance on Dominic Calvert-Lewin is really going to help me that much.
Yeah, the free hit chip is often a time to try and do something a bit different. And I'd say a lot of free hit chips are probably going to be similar. So you're not really playing against the free hit players. You're playing against the players that aren't free hitting and trying to get an edge on them. You've only got two Man City as it stands. You did just mention about getting Cancelo in as well. Obviously, John Stones potentially an option too, but Cancelo I think is the one that most people want. So right now, it looks like you're playing Diaz, Holding, and Wan-Bissaka. So which one would go if you were going to bring in another Man City player, Arsenal or United?
Tough. That's tough because I think actually both of them have got a good chance of getting a clean sheet this time around, and that's where my kind of quandaries lie. Now Cancelo I think has got more potential for attacking returns than say Wan-Bissaka does, so the chance to upside the defender is greater if I go with two Man Cities over the Man United one. But the slightly rogue differential in me wants to kind of have Bissaka in there just because I think I would really have liked Maguire, but I need an extra 0.1 and I was really tight on budget. So I was a bit like, I think Maguire with his head's got a good opportunity to get some upside in this game, and more than Wan-Bissaka does. I think it's a tougher call then as to whether you go with Maguire or Cancelo, or do I just stick with two City and ride it out and see what happens?
Yeah, Cancelo. I mean, I really like Cancelo. I don't know how he hasn't got a bigger return so far. I've never owned him this season, but I'm always worried whenever I watch
Yeah,
him.
me too.
One thing that a lot of people are considering, or at least I've seen a lot of chat about, it's one of those things that I feel like most people won't go through with, but it's playing 4-5-1. So instead of having Wilson up top, you can stick with Kane, for example, and obviously Wilson would switch down to another 4.5 like Davis or someone at Villa. Obviously, you are weakening the bench a bit then, and then obviously one of the Arsenal players could go up to Cancelo. What do you think about 4-5-1?
Yeah, I mean, there's potential there, isn't there? I think Newcastle is a nice fixture. And the reality is that there should be some attacking returns there for them in that game, which is why I've put Callum Wilson in, because of all of them, it feels like he's the one. I do think Newcastle are less attractive without St Maximin in their midst. They don't play as attacking and they don't get as many opportunities. Therefore, Wilson isn't kind of as creative as perhaps he could be if Maximin was fit. So that can work. And it does feel like a nice option. I just always feel like playing a fourth defender, there has to be a real upside to them. So if it was a case of I could have Maguire and Tierney alongside the two City boys, then that feels like a good strategy. But that requires a lot of surgery around the rest of the team. So like you say, Wilson's going to have to drop down quite dramatically. And then it leaves you with that quandary as to, well, if we get some Pep roulette, if we get a late injury or a game that gets canned, then my bench is looking decidedly dodgy, and kind of slightly risk avoidance in me makes me want to kind of keep my bench looking okay.
Are you building this team with the idea that potentially there could be more postponements? I mean, we had the announcement last night that the Premier League is continuing, so the only thing that would really stop it, at least for Game Week 18, right, we're not thinking further ahead than that at the moment, is positive tests or something like that. There was enough.
Yeah.
You could potentially postpone. Is that something that's on your mind when you're building the team, or are you trying not to worry about it too much?
It is for me. Lee and I had this conversation on our stream on Sunday, so it doesn't worry him at all. He's just playing it as he would as if COVID didn't exist in the world. But for me, it's always in the back of my mind that, if you, in game week 16, I was right down to my third sub and still didn't have enough players out. So I played that game with 10 men. And this kind of sits in the back of my mind that we just lost 2 games in that game week. Without any notice in terms of FPL, because obviously it happened after the deadline had passed. So in the back of my mind, I'm kind of thinking I just need to make sure that I'm not going all out too much and not giving myself enough scope, because we've got 6 games, so it makes sense to have somebody from each of those games just to be doubly safe and to make sure you get as many out as possible. Now, of course, it doesn't just affect me. So if a game gets called, that's going to be affecting everybody, regardless of whether you played the free hit chip or not, because most people, even if they're not free hitting, are going to have targeted Man City, Manchester United in particular because of the double. So but it is something that's in the back of my mind. Yeah, it probably should think about it less than I do, to be honest. But
yeah, I
that's
feel
me.
like you're playing the chip, and there's all this potential, and then there's a slight worry. I guess. Obviously, it is a big thing right now because there's only been 4 postponements, I think, but 3 of them have happened in the last week or so. So it is
Yeah.
playing on people's minds a bit more. I guess we will have had another week by the time. I mean, we should say we're recording this on Tuesday, but it might not go out till Wednesday or Thursday. But there's going to be at least 5-6 days until the deadline. So potentially there could be more news, and that might sway you a bit to just go for it, I guess, and get that triple city in and do it from there. When you forget, let's pretend that COVID's not a thing. We all wish it wasn't, of course, but let's pretend it's not a thing. You can pick whatever teams you want because there's going to be no postponements. When you play the free hit chip, in a blank, obviously, you are limited to the teams you can go for. Are you worried about having differentials? Because obviously, you can look on the main FPL page now, and Kieran Tierney's a differential, but in a free hit team, he's probably not because most people are going to opt for him. So does differentials play on your mind, or are you just getting out the best team possible?
Yeah, in this kind of week, it doesn't so much affect my decision making. I kind of think I just want the best players that I can afford with the FPL budget that I have. And Tierney is right up there on my list of kind of wants. And thankfully, it comes at a time where there's a number of other cheaper options, like Mitchell, for example, at Palace, who I won't play next week, but is playing, so can sit nicely on my bench at 3.9 and not cause any drama. So yeah, I think for me, playing a free hit chip enough is differential right now because it's going to give you a jump on those that are just playing with lesser number of players this week. But it's also going to give you a jump on those that have got out a full team, because those players that have played and have got a full team out are probably also having a nod to game week 19 and therefore may not have the kind of big hitting ones that everybody wants. So there won't be many that have got KDB, Cancelo and Diaz all in their teams as a result of what City have been like up until game week 17. There won't be a lot that are tripled up on Arsenal because likewise, Arsenal haven't been that solid until a couple of game weeks ago. So I think just having those players on their own makes them differentials. Of course, the Spurs boys will be highly owned, so they won't make much difference in terms of rank gain. But if they perform, and you don't have them in a free hit team, they will hurt you as a result of most other people still having them.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting week because you're basically spot on. Obviously, everyone's team's different, and some people are covered with all these players we're talking about, and they're fine for 18 and 19. But I can tell you, for my situation, I have 0 Man City players as it stands without wildcard. And if I wildcard, it's very difficult to have Arsenal and Spurs players as well because you're obviously thinking ahead. Yeah. So I agree. I think it's the kind of week, like if you've got a hunch and there is a differential you want to go for, you should absolutely go for it. But I also, it wouldn't really play on my mind. I just try and put out the best team possible, knowing that not every FPL manager is free hitting this week. So I quite like Sterling. I think he'll be someone that might be a little bit different. But outside of that, I'm really struggling. Like, are there any players that aren't in this team that not necessarily you'd really want to fit in, that there are maybe a little bit different?
Maguire is one that I would really like. I would really like Maguire. He's one that I think could have a really good week this week. I think the clean sheet's likely to be there. There's potential for attacking returns from his head. I mean, there always is, but of course, there particularly is, I think, this coming game week. And he makes a lot of sense moving forward as well because of what happens then in game week 19. So I think he's one that's kind of on my agenda. And then maybe one of the Wolves boys. I'm not convinced on Everton at the moment. So the Wolves boys, I think, could give some nice differential picks, the likes of Neto. Might just be a good shout going into that week because nobody's really talking about Wolves. Everybody's focusing in on these other big teams that have got the really nice fixtures, or Spurs because it's Spurs and we feel like we've spoken about Kane and Son all year, so it continues into this week. But Wolves are a bit overlooked and there's some really nice options there which could just provide a bit of a differential pick.
Yeah, for sure. I think, Son to Neto, that gives you money for Maguire and Cancelo. There you go. I guess one last question kind of on differential picks. Obviously, one team that, again, is not really being mentioned. We've kind of touched on it with Watkins, but one player in particular I've barely seen in any free hit teams is Jack Grealish, who... He is very divisive in how people think about him, but he is the 4th highest scoring midfielder. So he has had a pretty good season so far. He's only behind Fernandes, Son and Salah. So out of everyone playing this week, he's one of the top scoring players. You got any thoughts about him? Is it the Spurs factor, or do you just think it's a good time to go against him?
I the problem I have with Grealish is his lack of consistency. So he tends to haul or do absolutely nothing. And my concern is against Spurs, will he get that many opportunities to create a massive haul? I'm not sure that he will necessarily. Plus, he scored last week, and the way he's been going, he never gets back-to-back returns. I think if I was going to go with an Aston Villa mid, I'd still rather have El Ghazi. I think he's on better form, a lot cheaper, and will, when we're talking about these big hitters again, he's going to enable that to happen. For me, like, I'd have to lose Son to have Grealish, and I think there's more potential for Son to do something than there is Grealish in that game. Even without my Spurs goggles on, I think that's the case.
I'll believe you. I'll take your word for it on this one. Yeah, I like it. I think I know what you're saying. Like, he has been a lot of hauls and then some smaller scores and stuff. I just wonder, up against Aurier or Doherty, could be pretty good on that left side. But we'll see. El Ghazi I like as well because he's on penalties, which is a big thing.
It's obviously, a big plus.
We'll have to wait and see what gets said about Barkley, but. He's looking really good right now. Potentially a competitor to Saka, who's in pretty much every free hit team going at the moment. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Last question then. Again, we are a bit away from the deadline, so this could change. But as it stands, who is your captain? Are you going Spurs, Fernandes, or De Bruyne?
Oh, I think I'm going Bruno. He's been very trustworthy when he's had my armband. He's one that doesn't seem to let me down. I think the Aston Villa game is a tougher one for the likes of Kane and Son. So I'm not sure that I can see a haul in there. So for me, it'll be between Fernandes and KDB. And I just feel like Bruno's earned my trust this year. So he'll probably get it.
That's interesting. I think that's. I mean, it's hard to say it's a differential because in a week where there's only a few premium, like I think Fernandes, De Bruyne, and probably a Spurs player is going to be the highest three. But yeah, I think a lot of people will side towards Man City. I actually put a tweet out earlier. Double-digit hauls so far this season. Fernandes has had 8. Then Son with 7. Kane 5. Vardy 5. De Bruyne only 4. Now, obviously, De Bruyne did miss a few games of injury, but De Bruyne and Salah are only 4 double-digit hauls. Fernandes has had 8. That's ridiculous. So, and 2 of them have been 17-point hauls as well. So when he gets going with those penalties, he's a big call. I think, like I said, most people will go City, and it could be... it could be a mistake with Bruno Fernandes. So it'll be interesting to see if you go through with that on Tuesday. See if you keep up with that. I think that's all I really had to ask about this draft. I think it's looking pretty solid. A little bit different with no second Man City defender and stuff, but maybe that'll be fixed and or changed. Sorry, not fixed as if it's a mistake, but yeah, you might change it. And same with the keeper, like you said earlier. There is money to take out of the keeper if we're sure that
there is
Darlow's going to be the starter as well. So
I think the keeper change could happen. That might happen, but I do like to cover myself. Like, I mean, I did that this week, right? I have McCarthy as my keeper, but Forster as the backup. So that's
you didn't
helped
jam
me out.
Forster points.
Yeah, of course I did. I like to have the backup on my bench so that I'm covered for these eventualities. The trouble with having Newcastle is having a backup is really expensive. So I might not stick with them in the end. I might end up with a Newcastle defender instead, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's difficult to... I'm just trying to think now. It's difficult to have a backup keeper this week, I think, with a keeper you actually want to play, because a lot of them are just going to be expensive, obviously De Gea, Henderson, etc. Plus it blocks another spot. So yeah, I mean, if it works, if that's the team you want, then it's not the end of the world. But 0.8 million is quite a lot, isn't it, in a week like this? So that lets you do Holding to Tierney, for example. So interesting to see how you go. Obviously, you can check out the FPL Family channel as well. Just go and search for that on YouTube if you want to keep up to date with Sam. And thanks for joining me on this.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. We'll do it again sometime. Make sure you hit the like button. Subscribe if you're new around here. Good luck with your free hits and let us know in the comments below how yours are going. And we'll catch you again soon.